I watched my daughter-in-law, Kendra Hawthorne, casually toss my granddaughter Isabella's baby blanket into the trash. I didn't even hesitate. I practically leaped toward the garbage can and snatched it out before it was too late. I was thinking only of Isabella, so I grabbed that blanket and brought it straight back to my house. When I spread it out on the bed, my fingers brushed against something that felt strange. There was something hard sewn into the fabric, hidden between the layers of soft cotton. Curiosity just swept over me like a sudden chill. I grabbed my sewing scissors from the drawer. My hands were actually trembling as I carefully opened the seam, ripping the thread apart one tiny piece at a time. And when I finally saw what was concealed inside, I was absolutely shocked, floored. I never would have imagined that something so small, so unassuming, could contain something so horrifying. Because what I found wasn't just a simple object. It was solid proof of a lie that had been going on for years and years. It was the real truth about my son's death. It was the darkest, most awful secret my daughter-in-law had ever kept. And when I finally understood what it all truly meant, I knew in my heart that my life would never, ever be the same again. My name is Olivia Bridges and I'm 69 years old. I've been living alone in this house for the past 3 years. It's been that long since the day I lost my only son. Marcus was just 32 years old when he died. It happened in September on a regular Tuesday afternoon. I got the phone call from Kendra. She was absolutely sobbing, practically screaming, telling me that Marcus had had an accident, that he had fallen down the stairs in their house, hit his head really hard and wasn't responding at all. I got to the city's general hospital in about 15 minutes. I drove like a total maniac. My hands were sweating all over the steering wheel. When I finally got to the emergency room, Kendra was sitting in a chair with her face completely buried in her hands. She was wearing this pearl gray dress. There were blood stains on the sleeves of it. She saw me and rushed right toward me, embracing me tightly. She was sobbing uncontrollably into my shoulder. All I wanted was to see my son. I needed to see him with my own eyes. A doctor came out. He looked at us with that exact same expression that all doctors seem to have when they're about to tell you some really bad news. And then he spoke those words that completely destroyed my world. Marcus was gone. Severe cranial trauma. There was absolutely nothing they could do. I screamed. I cried. I totally collapsed onto the cold, hard hospital floor. Kendra held me tightly, telling me over and over that everything would be okay, that Marcus would have wanted us to be strong. But absolutely nothing was okay, and nothing ever would be again. My husband had died 15 years earlier from a heart attack. And now my only son was gone too. Marcus was all I had left in the world. He was a doctor, brilliant and so dedicated to his work. He worked long hours at the hospital saving people's lives. He had married Kendra 2 years before he died. She was a nurse too. They had met at work. He introduced her to me one Sunday afternoon. I remember she was wearing a cream-colored dress, and her smile was absolutely perfect. Almost a little too perfect. But Marcus was completely in love. His eyes just shone so brightly whenever he looked at her. He told me that she was the woman of his life, that he wanted to start a family and have children with her. And I really wanted to believe him. I wanted so much to believe that my son had finally found true happiness. A year after their wedding, Kendra got pregnant. Marcus was euphoric. He called me every single day to tell me all about how the baby was growing. They bought a new house and painted the baby's room a soft, pretty pink color. Marcus himself put the crib together. I remember seeing him so incredibly happy, so full of hope for the future. When Isabella was born, I felt like life had given me an amazing gift. A second chance to love someone unconditionally, to really care for someone deeply. My granddaughter was so beautiful, tiny and delicate, with Marcus's dark, soulful eyes. I knitted that mint green blanket for her with my own 2 hands. It took me weeks and weeks to finish it. Every single stitch was a piece of my love for her. Marcus absolutely adored it. He said it was magical, that whenever he wrapped Isabella up in it, she would immediately stop crying. He protected that blanket like it was a priceless treasure. But after the accident, everything just completely changed. Kendra became distant and cold. First, I totally understood. She was grieving deeply too. She had just lost her husband. She needed time and space to process everything, but the months passed, and she brought Isabella to see me less and less often. She always had excuses. That the baby was sick, that she had way too much work, that she needed to somehow reorganize her entire life. I really didn't want to pressure her. I didn't want to be that pushy, annoying mother-in-law. So I just waited patiently. I called her frequently and asked if I could visit my granddaughter. Sometimes she said yes. Other times she simply didn't even answer my calls. And when she actually let me see Isabella, I noticed something really strange and unsettling. Kendra was different, much colder, even more distant than before. Her gaze no longer held that phony, fake warmth from before. There was something calculating in her eyes, something that made me really nervous and on edge. But I just figured it was her pain, that Marcus's sudden and tragic death had just changed her, in the same way that it had changed me. I really tried to be understanding. I tried to give her the time and space she needed, until that one afternoon in October 3 years after Marcus's death. I had bought some new toys for Isabella. I wanted to surprise her and make her happy. I drove by Kendra's house to drop them off in the mailbox. I didn't want to bother her or interrupt her day. I just really wanted my granddaughter to know that her grandma was thinking about her. I parked my car across the street from her house. And then I saw her. Kendra was coming out of the garage with several large black trash bags, dragging them forcefully toward the dumpster. And in one of those bags I saw something that made my heart just completely stop. Isabella's blanket. That beautiful mint green blankie that I had knitted with so much love was crumpled up in a ball, partially hanging out of the bag. Kendra shoved it deep into the container with such strange violence, almost as if she hated that blanket, as if she really wanted to destroy it completely. I just froze, paralyzed. Why on earth would she throw away something so incredibly special? Why would she get rid of such a precious memory of Marcus? I just couldn't understand it. Kendra slammed the dumpster lid shut really hard and went back into the house. I waited for a few minutes trying to calm down. My breathing was ragged and shallow. I felt a mix of overwhelming rage and sadness washing over me. When I was absolutely sure that she wasn't coming back out, I got out of the car, walked slowly over to the dumpster, opened it up, and searched through all of the bags until I finally found it. There it was, dirty and stained, wrinkled up, and smelling strongly of expensive perfume and complete neglect. I carefully pulled it out, held it tightly against my chest, and drove straight home without even looking back once. I got back to my house shaking like a leaf. I immediately locked the front door. I went straight to my bedroom. I really needed to be alone with that blanket. I needed to try to understand why Kendra would have thrown it away like it was just worthless trash. I spread it out carefully over my bed, smoothing it out with my hands. It was definitely dirty, but it was still intact. The lace edges were still strong and firm. The mint green color looked so dull and faded under the lamplight. I ran my fingers over the entire surface of the blanket, feeling every texture, every stitch that I myself had made years and years ago. And then I felt it right in the very center of the blanket. A hard rectangular lump, hidden securely between the layers of fabric. It wasn't part of the blanket's batting. It was definitely something else. Something that someone had deliberately put in there on purpose. My heart started beating even faster. My hands started to sweat. What in the world was this thing? Why was there something hidden inside my granddaughter's baby blanket? I flipped the blanket completely over, looking for some kind of opening, a different seam, and finally I found it. On the bottom edge, almost totally invisible, was a line of absolutely perfect stitches made with thread that was the exact same color as the fabric. Someone had opened the blanket up, put something inside of it, and then sewn it back up so carefully that it was practically impossible to notice. I went to my nightstand, took out my sewing scissors, the same ones that I had used to knit that very blanket years ago. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely even hold them steady. I took a deep breath, found the start of the seam, and began to carefully cut it open slowly, thread by thread. Each snip of the scissors sounded way too loud in the absolute silence of my room. I felt like I was opening up something forbidden, something that I really shouldn't touch. But I just couldn't stop myself now. I cut the last few threads. The opening was finally exposed. I slipped my fingers inside. I felt something cold and metallic. I carefully pulled it out, and when I finally held it in my hands, the air just completely left my lungs. It was a small black old cell phone, judging by the model of it, probably 4 or 5 years old. I held it as if it were a bomb that was about to explode. Questions flooded my mind like a bursting river. Why would Kendra hide a cell phone inside Isabella's blanket? How long had it been hidden there? Why had she sewn it up so carefully? And why, after 3 long years, had she suddenly decided to throw the whole thing away now? I quickly searched the drawer of my dresser. I had an old charger that I kept just in case. I plugged it into the wall, attached the phone to it, and waited. The seconds felt like hours. My breathing was ragged and uneven. My hands just wouldn't stop shaking. The screen flickered slightly. A faint light appeared in the corner of the screen. It was charging, thankfully. I kept waiting 5 minutes and then 10 long minutes until the screen finally lit up completely. It had no password, no security code. It opened straight to the main menu, almost as if someone had wanted it to be incredibly easy to access, or as if they had never even imagined that anyone else would ever find it. My fingers trembled on the screen. There were several apps, messages, a gallery, contacts, and notes. I decided to start with the gallery. I tapped the icon and what I saw just absolutely chilled me to the bone. There were photos, lots and lots of photos. The first one was of Kendra. She was in an elegant restaurant. She was smiling, but she definitely wasn't alone. A man was sitting right beside her, young and handsome. He had his arm wrapped around her shoulders, kissing her cheek. That photo had a date stamped on it. It had been taken 4 years ago, when Marcus was still alive. When Kendra was still happily married to my son. I felt something inside me break into pieces. I kept swiping through even more photos. Kendra with the same man on the beach, in a hotel, in a car, hugging and kissing passionately. All of the photos were from 4 years ago. Kendra was having an affair. She was cheating on Marcus and he never even knew. He never suspected a thing. Tears started streaming down my cheeks uncontrollably. My son had absolutely loved that woman. He had trusted her completely, and she had totally betrayed him. But that wasn't even all of it. I kept looking. There were videos, several different video files saved in a separate folder. I tapped the first one. The screen went black for a moment, and then the image appeared. It was a home recording. The camera was stationary, propped up on some piece of furniture. I could clearly see a living room, Marcus and Kendra's living room. I recognized the familiar gray sofa, the coffee table, the painting hanging on the wall. And then they appeared, Kendra and that same man from the photos. They walked in laughing and talking. She was wearing a beautiful lavender dress. He took her by the waist, kissed her deeply, and they both fell onto the sofa. The entire scene was clear, way too clear. I immediately stopped the video. I just couldn't watch anymore. I felt sick to my stomach, but I knew that I needed to know more. I needed to try to understand what was really happening. I opened up the Messages application. There were long conversations between Kendra and a contact that was saved only as J. I started reading them. The messages were from 4 years ago. First, they were extremely romantic. Kendra told him how much she loved him, how much she missed him, that she just couldn't stand being away from him, that she hated having to pretend with Marcus. That name, Marcus, my son. She spoke of him as if he were an annoyance, an obstacle standing in her way. The messages continued, growing darker and more desperate. Kendra wrote to that man that she really wanted to be with him, that she wanted to build a life together with him, but that Marcus just wouldn't accept a divorce, that he was way too traditional, that he would never let her go. And then a message appeared that shattered my soul into a million pieces. There has to be another way. I can't keep going on like this. I need him to disappear. My hands just dropped the phone. It fell onto the bed. My breath caught in my throat. I read that message over and over again. I need him to disappear. Couldn't possibly be true. I couldn't be reading what I thought I was reading. I picked the phone up again. I scrolled further down the conversation. The man Jay replied, "Don't say crazy things like that. Just wait patiently. We'll find a way." But Kendra insisted, message after message, growing more and more desperate. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be with you right now. Marcus is the problem. If he weren't here, we'd finally be free." And then a few days later, another message appeared. This one was even more chilling and disturbing. "I talked to someone who can definitely help us. I just need you to trust me." The man replied, sounding very worried. "What did you do? Who did you talk to?" But Kendra didn't give him any details. She just said that soon everything would be resolved, that they would soon be free, that they could soon be together without having to hide their relationship. The messages stopped abruptly just 1 week before Marcus's death. There were no more conversations after that date, almost as if they had both stopped using that phone completely, as if they had really wanted to erase every single trace of their relationship. I got out of bed and walked slowly around the room, trying desperately to process everything that I had just discovered. Kendra had definitely planned something. She had spoken openly of making Marcus disappear. And just 1 week later, my son was dead. Had it really been just a tragic accident? Or had it been something much more sinister and planned out? The doctor's words echoed loudly in my mind. Severe cranial trauma, a fall down the stairs. But now, everything took on a completely different, horrifying meaning. I picked up the phone again. I looked in the notes application. There was only one entry, written just 2 days before Marcus's death. It read, "Tuesday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He'll be all alone. Everything has to look natural. An accident that absolutely no one can suspect." My legs just gave out beneath me. I sank heavily onto the bed. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. My son hadn't died in a simple accident. My son had been brutally murdered. And Kendra, the woman he had trusted completely, the mother of his child, had been an active part of it all. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I sat on my bed with the phone in my hands, reading and rereading those messages. Every single word was like a knife being twisted in my heart. Every sentence just confirmed what my heart already deeply knew, but what my mind had stubbornly refused to accept. Marcus hadn't died in an accident. My son had been murdered in cold blood, and the woman who had sworn to love him until death had meticulously planned everything, orchestrating his murder as if it were as simple as moving to a new house or changing jobs. The tears finally stopped flowing. Only a deep and profound emptiness remained in my chest, a black hole that swallowed everything whole. My memories of Kendra, the image that I had always had of her, everything had completely crumbled into dust in a matter of just a few hours. When the sun finally began to rise, I made a firm decision. I just couldn't stay silent any longer. I couldn't let Kendra remain free, walking around like she had done absolutely nothing wrong, raising Isabella with those blood-stained hands, the same hands that had carefully planned to kill my own son. But I definitely needed help. I needed someone that I could trust completely, someone who wouldn't just immediately think that I was crazy, someone who would actually believe me. I thought about going to the police, but how was I supposed to just show up with a cell phone that I had literally pulled out of the garbage? How was I even going to explain that I had found it carefully sewn into a baby blanket? I really needed more than that. I needed to fully understand the whole story. I needed to find out who that man, that Jay, in the messages actually was, and I absolutely needed to know if they had actually gone through with their twisted plan. I decided to call Geneva Sterling, my lifelong neighbor. She was 65 years old and had been my closest confidant ever since my husband had died. She knew how to really listen. She knew how to keep secrets, and most importantly, she knew me well enough to know that I would never ever invent something like this. I dialed her number quickly. She answered on the third ring. Her voice sounded sleepy and groggy. "Olivia, are you okay? It's 6 o'clock in the morning." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Geneva, I really need you to come over to my house right now. It's urgent." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard some movement. "I'm on my way." She hung up quickly. 15 minutes later, Geneva was knocking urgently at my door. I opened it immediately. She looked at me with obvious concern. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a mustard-colored sweater over her pajamas. What happened? You look absolutely terrible. I stepped aside to let her in. I closed the door, led her straight to my bedroom, showed her the blanket spread out on the bed, the phone still connected to the charger, and then I just started to tell her everything. I told her all about how I had seen Kendra throwing the blanket away, how I had rescued it from the dumpster, how I had found the hidden phone, and everything that I had discovered inside of it. Geneva listened in complete silence, her face shifting gradually from surprise to absolute horror. When I had finished talking, she picked up the phone, checked the photos, the videos, the messages, the note, everything. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, too. When she looked back up at me, there were tears in her eyes. My God, Olivia. This is solid evidence of a murder. I just nodded slowly. I know, but I can't just go to the police with this. I need more solid proof. I need to find out who that man really is. I need to fully understand everything before I take the next step. Geneva sat down on the bed, thinking deeply for a moment. What if we search Kendra's social media accounts? Maybe that man will appear in her contacts somewhere. It was actually a good idea. I pulled out my laptop, opened Facebook, and searched for Kendra's profile. It wasn't locked down. I could see everything. Her photos, her posts, her friends. I started scrolling through her contacts list. There were literally hundreds of names, way too many to check them all one by one. Geneva leaned over my shoulder to get a better look. Look for men whose names start with the letter J. That was the contact on the phone, right? I just nodded slowly. I filtered the search results. Several names appeared. Joshua, Jonathan, Julian, Jeremiah, Jeffrey. I started opening each profile separately. I was specifically looking for the face of the man in the photos, the one who was with Kendra in those incredibly compromising images. I checked Joshua's profile. No, definitely not him. Jonathan? Not him either. Jeremiah was way too old. Jeffrey didn't match the description at all. And then finally I opened the profile for Julian. Julian Hayes. And there he was. The same face, the same dark, piercing eyes, the same charming smile. It was definitely him, the man in all of the photos, the man with whom Kendra had planned to get rid of my son for good. It's him, I whispered, almost inaudibly. Geneva looked intently at the screen. Are you absolutely sure? I went back to the phone, compared the photos side by side. There was just no doubt in my mind that it was the exact same man. I went back to his Facebook profile. I started digging for more information. Julian Hayes, 38 years old, lived in the same city as us. He worked for a construction company. I checked his public photos. There were several photos from years ago. In some of them he appeared alone, and in others he was with friends, but there were absolutely no recent photos with Kendra, almost as if they had intentionally erased every single trace of their relationship, as if they had never even been together at all. We have to find him, I said firmly. Geneva nodded in agreement. But please be careful, Olivia. If this man was actually involved in Marcus's death, he could be extremely dangerous. I knew it, but I honestly didn't even care. I desperately needed answers. I needed justice for my son. I searched for even more information about Julian online. I found his LinkedIn profile. He worked as a site supervisor. He had contacts with various companies in the area. Nothing really seemed out of the ordinary or suspicious. He seemed like a normal man with a normal life, except for the fact that he had potentially helped to plan a murder. Geneva suggested something that I hadn't even considered. What if we go to Kendra's house? Maybe we can find even more evidence there, important documents, incriminating emails, something that actually connects everything together. It was definitely risky, but it made perfect sense. If Kendra had hidden that phone inside of Isabella's baby blanket, maybe she had other things hidden somewhere as well. We can't just walk right in there, I said hesitantly. We definitely need a believable excuse. Geneva thought hard for a moment. What if you just tell her that you really want to see Isabella, that you miss your granddaughter terribly? While you're distracting her, I can discreetly look around for anything suspicious. It really wasn't a perfect plan by any means, but it was honestly the only one that we had. We decided to try it that very afternoon. I sent Kendra a quick text message. Hi Kendra. I know that I've been persistent lately, but I miss Isabella so much. Can I please stop by to see her this afternoon? Just for a little while. 20 minutes passed before she finally replied. Hi Olivia. Today really isn't a good day at all. Isabella is a little cranky. Maybe another day. I gritted my teeth in frustration. It was always the exact same thing. Always just excuses. But this time I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. Please Kendra. It will only be a few minutes. I actually bought her a present. I really want to give it to her in person. Another long silence and then finally her response. Fine, but only for half an hour. I actually have things to do. It was all that I needed to hear. Geneva and I quickly prepared. She would stay in the car at first, waiting for my signal. If I actually managed to distract Kendra for long enough, Geneva would come inside with some believable excuse. We would then look for anything at all that could serve as additional evidence. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, we arrived at Kendra's house. It was a 2-story home with freshly painted white walls, a well-kept lawn, the very same house where Marcus had died, where he had supposedly fallen down the stairs, where his young life had tragically ended. I rang the doorbell. My heart was pounding so incredibly hard that I thought it was going to jump right out of my chest. I heard footsteps approaching. The front door opened and there was Kendra. She was wearing black slacks and a salmon-colored blouse. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup was flawless as always. Hello Olivia, she said with a cold, practiced smile. Come in. I stepped inside the house cautiously. The strong smell of lavender filled the air. Everything was perfectly clean, tidy, and organized, almost too perfect, as if absolutely nothing bad had ever actually happened within those walls. Where's Isabella? I asked, trying to sound casual. Upstairs in her room. I'll go ahead and call her down. Kendra turned and went up the stairs, the very same stairs where Marcus had supposedly fallen down. I looked intently at every single step, searching for some kind of sign, a mark, but there was absolutely nothing at all. Kendra came back down the stairs with Isabella in her arms. My granddaughter had grown so much since I had last seen her. She was 3 years old now. Her dark hair fell in soft, beautiful curls over her shoulders. Her eyes were identical to Marcus's. Seeing her just completely broke my heart and filled me with overwhelming love at the exact same time. Hi, Grandma, Isabella said with her sweet little voice. She reached her tiny arms out to me. I took her gently, hugging her tightly to my chest. She smelled wonderfully of baby shampoo and complete innocence. She was honestly the only pure thing left of my beloved son. The only good thing that had actually survived all of this overwhelming darkness. I missed you so much, my love, I whispered softly to her. She smiled brightly, showing me a toy that she was holding tightly in her hand. A well-loved brown teddy bear. She started telling me a long and complicated story about it. I listened intently while carefully watching Kendra out of the corner of my eye. Kendra was standing idly by the window looking at her phone. She seemed distracted, almost nervous, as if she seemed to be waiting for something, or perhaps someone. I decided to seize the opportunity. I quickly grabbed my phone and sent a message to Geneva. Asterisk coming now. Asterisk. A few minutes passed, and then the doorbell startled us. Kendra looked up, clearly surprised by the sound. Were you expecting someone? I asked, trying my best to sound casual and unconcerned. She shook her head, her brow furrowed in confusion. She walked over to the door and opened it to reveal Geneva standing there with a friendly smile on her face. Hi, so sorry to interrupt. I'm Geneva, Olivia's neighbor. I came with her, but I realized I left a bag in the car. Would it be alright if I came in and used your bathroom? It's a bit urgent. Kendra hesitated, looking back and forth between Geneva and me. I gave her a nod, acting as if it was the most normal request in the world. Sure, Kendra finally replied, the hall, first door on the left. Geneva stepped inside, giving me a quick, subtle glance. I understood the message perfectly. She was going to look around for anything she could find while I kept Kendra occupied and distracted. I needed to buy her as much time as possible. I launched into a conversation, asking Kendra about her job, how she was handling everything, and if she needed any help with Isabella. Kendra responded with short, terse answers, her attention constantly drifting back to her phone. She seemed restless and on edge. I kept the conversation going, telling her that I had found some old photos of Marcus, and that I wanted to show them to Isabella when she got older, so she could get to know her daddy. The moment I mentioned Marcus's name, Kendra noticeably tensed up. Yes, of course, when she's older. Her voice sounded different, almost strained. She glanced towards the hallway. Your friend is taking a really long time. Maybe she's not feeling well, I said, improvising. You know, at our age, everything takes a little longer. Kendra didn't seem convinced by my explanation. She stood up abruptly. I'm going to go check on her. My heart began to race. I had to stop her from going down that hallway. Wait, Kendra. There's something I wanted to ask you. She stopped and turned to face me, a questioning look on her face. What is it? I took a deep breath, trying to sound as believable as possible. Isabella's blanket. The one I knitted for her. I haven't seen it around lately. Do you still use it? Her expression changed instantly. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. The blanket? Yes, of course. It's in the wash right now. It got dirty. I knew immediately that she was lying, but I couldn't confront her about it, not just yet. Oh good. I'm so glad you still have it. Marcus loved it so much. I brought up my son's name again intentionally, wanting to gauge her reaction. Kendra pursed her lips, a subtle sign of annoyance. Yes, Marcus loved many things. There was a distinct edge to her tone, a hint of bitterness, maybe even resentment. Before I could respond to her remark, Geneva reappeared in the hallway. So sorry for the delay. I'm feeling much better now. Kendra eyed her suspiciously. That's good. Geneva walked over to me, gently touching my shoulder. That was the signal I'd been waiting for. She had found something. We needed to leave, and we needed to leave now. Well, Kendra, we really shouldn't bother you any longer. Thank you so much for letting us see Isabella. I stood up and kissed my granddaughter on the forehead. I love you, little one. Grandma will be back to see you soon. Isabella gave me a quick hug. Bye, Grandma. Kendra walked us to the door, and as we stepped outside, she closed it quickly, almost slamming it shut. Geneva and I walked in silence to the car. We got inside and I closed the door behind me. What did you find? Geneva reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. It was in her room in the closet, hidden under some boxes. I eagerly opened the envelope. Inside were documents, papers related to Marcus's life insurance policy. My son had a policy for $500,000, and Kendra was listed as the sole beneficiary. The full amount had been paid out just 3 months after his death. There were also bank statements showing large transfers of money, including one for $200,000 to an account under the name Julian Hayes. My God, I whispered. She paid him. She paid him to help her kill Marcus. Geneva nodded in agreement. There's more. She pulled out another piece of paper. It was a copy of Isabella's birth certificate, but something was clearly wrong. The mother's name wasn't Kendra. Instead, it read * Leah Davis. Who is Leah Davis? I asked, completely bewildered. Geneva shook her head. I don't know, but according to this document, she's Isabella's biological mother, not Kendra. The world around me seemed to stop spinning. I couldn't make sense of any of this. Isabella wasn't Kendra's daughter, but Kendra had been pregnant. I saw her with my own eyes. We all did. Geneva pointed to the date listed on the certificate. Look, Isabella's birth date doesn't match what Kendra told us. There's a difference of 2 months. I carefully examined the certificate. Geneva was right. According to the document, Isabella had been born 2 months earlier than Kendra had claimed. This makes absolutely no sense. Kendra faked her pregnancy. She stole a baby. I don't know, Geneva said, but we need to find Leah Davis. She's the key to figuring out what's going on. I went back home with Geneva, my mind reeling from what we had just discovered. We sat down in the living room and spread all the documents out on the table. The phone, the photos, the messages, the insurance papers, Isabella's birth certificate with Leah Davis's name on it. Everything was starting to come together, forming a clearer picture of what had happened. Kendra had plotted Marcus's murder in order to get her hands on the insurance money. She had used Julian to carry out the plan, paying him off with a portion of the money. But there was another story here as well, the story of Leah Davis and Isabella. We need to find out more about Leah, I said. I opened my laptop and began searching for her name online. Several profiles popped up, but none of them seemed to be a match. I added the city's name to my search terms, and that's when I found something that caught my attention. It was a local newspaper article from 4 years ago. The headline read, *Young mother missing. Family seeks help locating Leah Davis. There was a photo accompanying the article, showing a 23-year-old girl with long hair and sad, haunting eyes. According to the article, she had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind her 2-month-old baby. Isabella, I whispered. Leah disappeared and left Isabella behind. Geneva read the article over my shoulder. Or maybe she didn't leave her willingly. Maybe Kendra made her disappear. The thought sent a chill down my spine. You think Kendra killed Leah too? I don't know, but think about it. Kendra needed a baby to complete her perfect family facade with Marcus. Maybe she met Leah, took advantage of her situation, and then got rid of her when she no longer needed her. It was a horrifying theory, but it made a disturbing amount of sense. I searched for more information about Leah's disappearance. I found another article, this one more recent, from just 6 months ago. Remains of missing young woman found, identified as Leah Davis. They had discovered her body in an abandoned lot on the outskirts of the city. The investigation had been closed. The cause of death? Cranial trauma. The very same cause of death as Marcus. It can't be a coincidence, I said, my voice trembling. Kendra killed her. She killed Leah to get Isabella, and then she killed Marcus to get the money. Geneva reached out and took my hand. Olivia, this is too big for us to handle on our own. We need to go to the police right now. She was right. We couldn't keep investigating this on our own. We had evidence of 2 murders, possibly even more. We needed professional help. I picked up my phone and searched for the number of the local police precinct. I dialed the number. A man's voice answered on the other end. Central Precinct. How may I help you? I took a deep breath and spoke into the phone. I need to report a murder, 2 murders, and I have evidence to prove it. They scheduled an appointment for me the next day. A detective named James Reynolds would be assigned to the case. They asked me to bring all the evidence I had collected. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I tossed and turned in bed, my mind racing with everything I had uncovered. Kendra's lies, my son's death, Leah Davis, Isabella. My granddaughter wasn't actually my blood relative, but that didn't change anything. She was Marcus's daughter in his heart. He had loved her as his own, had cared for her unconditionally. And now, that little girl was in the hands of a killer, in the hands of the woman who had murdered her real mother and her adoptive father. I couldn't let Kendra keep her. I had to get Isabella out of that house, away from harm. I had to protect her at all costs. But first, I needed to convince the police to believe my story. I needed them to investigate, to arrest Kendra, and to bring justice for Marcus and Leah. At 9 a.m. The next morning, Geneva and I arrived at the police precinct. We were greeted by Detective Reynolds, a man who appeared to be in his mid-40s, tall with short, neatly combed hair, graying at the temples, and with piercing, intelligent eyes. He was wearing a beige button-down shirt and dark trousers. Mrs. Bridges, he said, extending his hand. I nodded. I'm Detective James Reynolds. Please come in. He led us to his office, a small room filled with filing cabinets and stacks of folders. There were photos on the walls, presumably of solved cases. We sat down in the chairs across from his desk. He settled into his chair and pulled out a notebook. Tell me everything from the very beginning. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told him about Marcus's death, how Kendra had claimed it was an accident, About the blanket I found in the trash, the hidden phone, the photos, the messages, the videos, the note about the plan. I showed him everything we had found. The phone, the insurance documents, the bank transfers to Julian Hayes, Isabella's birth certificate with Leah Davis's name on it, the news articles about Leah's disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her body. Detective Reynolds listened in complete silence, meticulously taking notes, carefully examining each document, looking at the photos on the phone, and reading all the messages. His expression remained serious and focused throughout. When I finally finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and let out a sigh. "This is serious," he said finally. "Very serious. If what you're telling me is true, we're talking about 2 premeditated homicides, possibly even 3 if we consider the child's biological father." I froze, completely stunned. The biological father? If Isabella wasn't Kendra's daughter, she must have had a father, someone who was involved with Leah Davis. I shook my head in disbelief. I didn't find anything about that. The detective made a note in his notebook. "I'll look into it, but first I need to verify all of this evidence." "What are you going to do?" I asked him. "I'm going to reopen the case of your son's death. I'm going to request an exhumation and order a second autopsy. I'm also going to thoroughly investigate the death of Leah Davis. And of course, I'll be interrogating Julian Hayes." I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. Finally, someone believed me. Someone was going to take action. "And Kendra, are you going to arrest her?" The detective shook his head. "Not yet. I need more evidence before I can issue an arrest warrant. I don't want her to flee if she suspects we're investigating her." It made sense, but it was still incredibly frustrating. "And in the meantime, Isabella is still with her," I pointed out. The detective looked at me with compassion in his eyes. "I understand your concern, but legally, Kendra is the girl's guardian. I can't just take her away without a court order. And for that, I need solid, irrefutable proof. The phone, while important, isn't enough on its own." The detective sighed. "It's compelling evidence, but a good lawyer could argue that it was planted, that we don't know for sure where it came from. I need more than that. I need testimonies, forensic evidence, clear, undeniable connections." I felt utterly helpless. "How long is all of this going to take?" Geneva asked, voicing my own anxieties. The detective shrugged. "It depends. If I find what I'm looking for quickly, maybe a couple of weeks. If not, it could take months." I didn't have months. I couldn't leave Isabella with Kendra for that long. "There's something else," I said. "Kendra was very nervous yesterday. She kept looking at her phone, as if she was waiting for something or planning something." The detective noted that down as well. "Do you have any idea what it might be?" I shook my head. "No, but it gave me a really bad feeling." "All right. I'm going to put discreet surveillance on her house. If she tries anything, we'll know about it." That reassured me at least a little bit. At least they would be watching her. At least they would know if she tried to run or if she tried to harm Isabella. We said goodbye to the detective. He gave us his personal cell phone number. "Call me if you notice anything strange. Anything at all, no matter what time it is." I nodded, promising that I would. Geneva and I left the precinct. The sun was high in the sky, and it was a hot day, but I felt cold inside, chilled to the bone with fear. "Now what do we do?" Geneva asked, her voice full of concern. "We wait," I said bitterly. "We wait and pray that they find enough evidence to arrest her before it's too late." The following days were pure torture. Every hour felt like an eternity. I couldn't stop thinking about Isabella, wondering if she was okay, if Kendra suspected anything, if she would try to run away. Detective Reynolds called me every couple of days to give me updates on the investigation. He had interrogated Julian Hayes. At first, Julian had denied everything. He claimed he barely knew Kendra, that they were just casual acquaintances from work. But when the detective showed him the photos and the messages from the hidden phone, he broke down and confessed to the affair. He admitted that Kendra had talked to him about getting rid of Marcus, but he swore that he never agreed to it, that he told her she was crazy, that he didn't want to be a part of something like that. However, the bank transfers told a very different story. The detective pressed him further, showing him the statements, The $200,000 that Kendra had sent him just 3 months after Marcus's death. Julian couldn't explain it. He claimed it was a loan, that Kendra had given it to him to start a business, but he had no documentation to back up his claim. "I'm holding him for 24 hours, the detective told me. I'm hoping he'll confess to everything, otherwise I'll have to let him go. I just don't have enough evidence to keep him detained any longer." That night, Julian asked for a lawyer and refused to answer any more questions. The detective was forced to release him, but the investigation continued. They exhumed Marcus's body. The second autopsy revealed something that the first one had missed. There were signs of a struggle on his wrists, bruises that indicated someone had held him down. It hadn't been an accidental fall. It was murder, the detective confirmed. "Your son was held down and deliberately pushed down those stairs." Tears streamed down my face. Knowing the truth was painful, but it was also necessary. Marcus deserved justice. They also thoroughly investigated Leah Davis's death. They discovered that the abandoned lot where her body had been found belonged to a company where Julian Hayes had worked as a supervisor. The connection was becoming clearer and clearer. Julian had had access to that location. He could have easily taken the body there and buried it without anyone suspecting a thing. Furthermore, they checked Isabella's adoption records. There were none. Legally, Isabella was still registered as the biological daughter of Kendra and Marcus, but the original birth certificate told a very different story. Someone had falsified the documents. Someone had erased Leah's trail. "We're building the case," the detective told me. "Little by little, every piece of the puzzle is falling into place. Soon we'll have enough to arrest her." Another week went by, a week filled with anguish, fear, and sleepless nights. And then, early one morning, my phone rang, jolting me awake. It was Detective Reynolds. His voice sounded urgent. "Mrs. Bridges, I need you to come down to the precinct right away. It's about Kendra." My heart stopped beating. "What happened?" There was a brief pause. "She tried to flee. We intercepted her at the airport. She had tickets for herself and Isabella. They were planning to leave the country. I got dressed in 5 minutes flat. Geneva came with me. We arrived at the precinct, and the detective was waiting for us. He led us to an observation room. Through a one-way window I saw Kendra. She was sitting in a chair, handcuffed. Her face, once so carefully maintained, was now a mess. Her makeup was smeared. Her hair was disheveled. We arrested her 2 hours ago, the detective explained. When she tried to pass through airport security, our alert system was triggered. She had fake passports for herself and the girl, and she had $500,000 in cash divided into several suitcases. "Where's Isabella?" I asked desperately. "She's with the Department of Family Services. She's safe, a little scared, but otherwise fine. They're going to need you to come identify yourself as her grandmother to see if she can stay with you temporarily while we sort everything out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Isabella was safe, away from Kendra's reach, and I could have her with me, protect her the way I should have from the very beginning. "I want to see her now." The detective nodded. "Of course, but first I need you to see this." He showed me a recording from the interrogation room. Kendra was sitting across from another detective, her arms crossed, her jaw clenched tightly. "I have nothing to say. I want a lawyer." The detective interrogating her didn't flinch. "He's on his way. But in the meantime, why don't you explain why you were trying to flee the country with $500,000 in cash?" Kendra didn't respond. She just stared blankly at the table. The detective continued. "We have evidence, Kendra. Messages, photos, bank transfers. We know about Julian. We know about Leah. We know about Marcus. Everything." Hearing Marcus's name, Kendra finally looked up. There was something dark and malevolent in her eyes. "You don't know anything," she said coldly. "You can't prove a thing." The detective smiled, but it was a humorless smile, devoid of any warmth. "Oh, really? We have the phone you hid in Isabella's blanket, the same blanket you threw in the trash, thinking no one would ever find it. We have the messages where you plotted to murder your husband. We have the transfers to Julian Hayes." Kendra's face turned pale. "That phone? How?" She stopped abruptly, realizing she had already said too much. The detective leaned forward, his gaze intense. Your mother-in-law found it. Olivia, the woman you stole her son from. The woman who is now going to take care of Isabella while you rot in prison. Kendra's expression shifted from panic to pure, unadulterated fury. That nosy old woman. I knew I shouldn't have let her near the girl. I knew she was snooping around. That's why I had to leave. That's why I needed to disappear before it was too late. Disappear? The detective's voice was sharp and accusatory. Like you made Leah Davis disappear? The name dropped like a bomb, silencing the room. Kendra visibly recoiled, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. I don't know who you're talking about. The detective pulled out a photo and placed it on the table in front of her. It was Leah Young, smiling and full of life. Leah Davis, Isabella's real mother. The girl who disappeared 4 years ago. The same girl we found dead in a lot owned by the company where your accomplice Julian worked. Kendra closed her eyes tightly. I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything else. The detective leaned back in his chair, unfazed. Suit yourself, but this isn't going to go away. We have enough evidence to convict you for double homicide, for fraud, for falsification of documents. You're going to spend the rest of your life behind bars. The recording came to an end. Detective Reynolds turned to me. She still won't confess, but she will eventually. The evidence against her is overwhelming. What's going to happen to Julian? I asked. We arrested him too. He's in another room right now and he's talking. He's trying to blame everything on Kendra, claiming she manipulated him, and that he was just following her orders because he was afraid of her. I wasn't surprised in the least. Cowards always try to save their own skins. Tell me more about Julian's statement, I said. The detective opened his notebook and began to read. According to Julian, Kendra contacted him 4 years ago. They were having an affair. She told him she was tired of her marriage, that Marcus was boring and controlling, and that she wanted a different life. That's when she proposed the plan, to wait until Marcus was home alone, push him down the stairs and make it look like an accident. In return, they would split the life insurance money. My stomach churned. Hearing the details of how they had planned my son's death was almost unbearable. Julian claims he refused at first, but Kendra eventually convinced him. She showed him the insurance papers, $500,000. She promised him $200,000 for himself and a life together after everything was over. Geneva, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke up. And what about Leah? What did Julian say about her? The detective turned to face her. That's where the story takes a darker turn. According to Julian, Kendra met Leah at the hospital where she worked. Leah was a patient. She had been admitted for complications during her pregnancy. She was alone, without any family or resources. Kendra saw an opportunity and befriended Leah, offering her help and telling her she could stay at her house after the baby was born. Leah accepted because she had nowhere else to go. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Kendra had planned everything from the very beginning. She wanted to steal that baby. The detective nodded in agreement. Exactly. According to Julian, Kendra lied to Marcus, telling him that she was pregnant. She wore loose-fitting clothes and faked all the symptoms. Marcus never suspected a thing. When Leah gave birth, Kendra took the baby. She told Marcus that the baby had been born at home, and that everything had happened so quickly. And Leah? What happened to her? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The detective took a deep breath. Julian says Kendra gave her something, a drug, to incapacitate her so she couldn't resist. Then she took her to the abandoned lot where her body was later found and killed her, using the same method she used on Marcus. Cranial trauma. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. Kendra wasn't just a murderer. She was a monster. She had killed a defenseless young woman, stolen her baby, and then killed my son just to keep his money. And Isabella's father, the real father. What about him? According to the records we found, Leah never registered the father's name. Either she didn't know who he was or she didn't want to involve him. We're still investigating, but for now there's no trace of him. I wiped my tears away. I want to see Isabella now, please. The detective led me to another wing of the building. There was a waiting room with a box full of toys. A woman from the Department of Family Services was there. And in a corner playing with some colored blocks was my granddaughter Isabella. Isabella, I whispered. She looked up, saw me, and ran towards me as fast as her little legs could carry her. Grandma! I scooped her up in my arms, holding her tightly against my chest. She clung to me, burying her face in my shoulder. She was scared and confused, but she was safe. I'm here, my love. Everything is going to be all right. The social worker approached us, a gentle smile on her face. Mrs. Bridges, I'm Renee. I work with the department. Detective Reynolds explained the situation to me. We'll need to do an evaluation before we can let Isabella go with you, but everything indicates that this is the best thing for the child. I'll do whatever is necessary, I said, my voice filled with determination. I just want to take care of her and protect her. Renee smiled warmly. I know, and I can see that she loves you very much. That's the most important thing. I spent the next few hours with Isabella. We talked, and I told her that she would be staying with me for a little while. I didn't tell her the truth about Kendra, not yet. She was too young to understand. I would explain everything to her later, when she was older and better equipped to process such a difficult truth. For now, she just needed to feel loved, safe, and secure. Renee completed all the necessary evaluations. She inspected my house, talked to me about my ability to care for a 3-year-old girl, and asked me questions about my health, my finances, and my support network. Geneva stayed with me the entire time, acting as both a witness and a source of support. At the end of the day, Renee gave me her approval. Isabella can stay with you temporarily. There will be follow-up visits and eventually a hearing to determine permanent custody, but for now, you are her legal guardian. I signed all the necessary paperwork, took Isabella's hand, and together we left that building. Geneva drove us home in her car. The entire way, Isabella slept peacefully in my lap, her breathing soft and tranquil. When we arrived at my house, I carefully carried her into my bedroom, laid her down on my bed, and covered her with a soft blanket. I sat beside her watching her sleep. She looked so much like Marcus with the same eyes and the same nose. Even though she didn't share his blood, she was his daughter in every way that truly mattered. I promise I will protect you, I whispered to her. No one will ever harm you again. Your daddy would have wanted you to be safe, and I'm going to make sure that happens. Geneva came into the room, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did it, Olivia. You saved that child. I shook my head. No, I just did what any grandmother would do, what I should have done from the beginning. Geneva sat beside me. Don't blame yourself. You couldn't have known what Kendra was capable of. Maybe she was right, but guilt still gnawed at me. If I had been more attentive, if I had questioned things more, if I hadn't trusted so much, maybe Marcus would still be alive. Maybe Leah too. What happens now? Geneva asked. Detective Reynolds is going to continue building the case. There will be trials, testimonies. It's going to be a long process, but Kendra is going to pay for what she did, and Julian will too. Geneva nodded. Good. They deserve it. The following months were a whirlwind. Kendra and Julian's case became a media sensation. Newspapers spoke of the killer nurse, the woman who had murdered her husband and her daughter's biological mother for money. Cameras camped outside the precinct every time there was a hearing. I tried to keep Isabella away from all of it. I enrolled her in a preschool. I bought her new clothes and toys. I fixed up a room in my house for her. I painted the walls a soft yellow. I filled the room with stuffed animals and books. I wanted her to feel at home, to forget the horror she had lived through. But the nights were hard. Isabella had nightmares. She would wake up crying, calling for her mommy. And I didn't know what to tell her. I couldn't tell her that her mommy was in prison, that her mommy had killed her daddy, that her mommy wasn't actually her mommy. I just hugged her, sang her lullabies, and told her she was safe, that I would always take care of her. Slowly, the nightmares became less frequent. Isabella began to smile more, to play, to be a normal child. That gave me hope. Detective Reynolds kept me updated on the case. Julian had accepted a plea deal with the district attorney's office. He would testify against Kendra in exchange for a reduced sentence, 25 years instead of life. It infuriated me that he received clemency, but I understood that his testimony was crucial. Kendra, on the other hand, refused to plead guilty. Her lawyer argued that all the evidence was circumstantial, that there was no direct proof that she had committed the murders, and that Julian was lying to save his own skin. But the prosecution had a solid case. The phone with the messages, the photos, the videos from the safe, the bank transfers, the forensic evidence from Marcus' second autopsy. Everything pointed to Kendra. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. One afternoon, while Isabella was taking her nap, I received an unexpected call. It was Detective Reynolds. "Mrs. Bridges, I need you to come to the precinct. There's something you need to see." His voice sounded serious, more serious than usual. "What happened?" I asked, my heart racing. "I prefer to explain it to you in person. Can you come this afternoon?" I agreed. I asked Geneva to watch Isabella, and I went to the precinct. The detective was waiting for me in his office. He had a folder on his desk. "Please sit down." I sat. He opened the folder, pulling out some photos. They were images of crime scenes. One was of the lot where Leah was found. Another was of the stairs where Marcus died. "Remember I told you we were investigating Isabella's biological father?" I nodded. "Yes. You said there was no record." The detective nodded. "Correct. Leah never put the father's name on the birth certificate, but we kept investigating. We spoke to Leah's former co-workers, friends, and neighbors, and we found something interesting. Several witnesses mentioned that Leah was seeing someone, a man who worked at the hospital, the same hospital where Marcus and Kendra worked." My stomach clenched. "Who was it?" The detective pulled out another photo. It was a hospital ID badge image, a man about 30 years old, dark hair, light eyes, and then I saw it. The resemblance was unsettling. That man, the detective said, was named Andre Walker. He was a lab technician, and according to several testimonies, he and Leah were in a relationship. "Where is he now?" I asked. The detective lowered his gaze. "He died 3.5 years ago, 6 months after Leah's disappearance." I felt a chill. "How did he die?" The detective looked directly at me. "Car accident. He lost control of his car on a remote road. He fell down a ravine. Died instantly." "Another accident?" I whispered. The detective nodded. "Exactly. And guess who reported the accident? Who was the first one to arrive at the scene?" I didn't need him to tell me. I already knew. "Kendra." The detective placed another photo on the table. Kendra was on duty that night. She claimed she was driving home when she saw Andre's car run off the road. She called emergency services, but when they arrived, Andre was already dead. "Do you think she killed him too?" The detective took a deep breath. "We don't have proof. The case was closed as an accident, but now with everything we know, we're reopening the investigation. There are too many coincidences. First Leah disappears, then Andre dies, then Marcus dies. All connected somehow. All dead in circumstances that Kendra could have manipulated." My hands were shaking. How many people did she kill? How many lives did she destroy? The detective closed the folder. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. I'm going to review every case, every suspicious death connected to Kendra in the last 5 years. If there are more victims, we will find them." I left the precinct in a state of shock. Kendra wasn't just a murderer. She was a serial killer, meticulous, calculating. She had eliminated anyone who stood in her way. Leah because she had the baby Kendra wanted. Andre because he was the baby's father and could claim her. Marcus because he had the money she needed. I went back home. Geneva was waiting for me in the living room. "What happened? You look pale." I told her everything about Andre, about the possibility of more victims. Geneva put her hands to her mouth. "My God, it's worse than we thought." I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake thinking about all of Kendra's victims. Leah, Andre, Marcus, and how many other people might have been her victims, how much pain she had caused, and how I had been so blind, so close to her for years without seeing who she really was. The next morning, Detective Reynolds showed up at my house without warning. He brought more news. We found something else. We checked the medical records at the hospital where Kendra worked. There were 3 suspicious deaths of patients under her care in the last 4 years. All were elderly. All died of cardiac arrest. At the time, no one suspected anything. It was attributed to complications of age. But now we are exhuming the bodies, looking for traces of medication that could have induced the arrests. I felt faint. Are you saying Kendra killed her own patients? The detective nodded. It's a possibility. If the analyses confirmed they were poisoned, then we'd be talking about at least 6 victims, possibly more. Why would she do it? What did she gain by killing those elderly people? The detective pulled out another folder. Money. It was always about money. 2 of those patients modified their wills shortly before they died. They left significant donations to the hospital. Kendra had been very kind to them, very attentive. She earned their trust, and then mysteriously the money from those donations disappeared. It never reached the hospital. It was diverted to phantom bank accounts. We are tracing those accounts, and all of them have a connection to Kendra or Julian. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Kendra had built a criminal empire. She had killed, robbed, and lied. All with a perfect smile and elegant dresses. No one had suspected. No one. Until I found that phone. Is there anything else? The detective said Julian is cooperating more than expected. He says Kendra has hidden documents. Proof she kept his insurance just in case Julian ever betrayed her. She wanted something to threaten him with. What kind of documents? The detective leaned forward. Bank records, contracts, even videos. Julian says Kendra recorded him helping with Marcus's murder. And she has those recordings hidden somewhere. Where? The detective shook his head. Julian says he doesn't know that Kendra never told him, but he thinks they might be in her house in some hidden spot only she knows. My mind raced. We need those documents. If they exist, they could seal the case against her. The detective nodded. We already have a search warrant. We are going to check the house from top to bottom, every corner, every wall, until we find what we are looking for. That afternoon, a team of police officers entered Kendra's house. I went with them. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see her perfect life dismantled piece by piece. They checked everything. Drawers, closets. They lifted rugs and knocked on walls, looking for hidden compartments. And after 4 hours, one of the officers yelled from the basement, "I found something." We ran downstairs. The officer had moved an old bookshelf. Behind it was a safe built into the wall, small and discreet. "We need to open it," the detective said. They brought in a specialist who opened the box in 20 minutes. Inside we found a treasure trove of evidence. There were external hard drives, USB drives, folders with documents, and printed photos. Everything was meticulously organized. Every file was labeled, every document in its place. It was Kendra's personal archive, her crime log. "It's as if she wanted to remember everything," the detective said as he reviewed the documents. "As if she was proud of what she had done." Among the files were videos. Videos of Kendra and Julian planning Marcus' murder. Videos of Kendra confessing everything to the camera, as if she were documenting her crimes for posterity. In one of the videos, Kendra spoke directly to the camera. Her voice was cold, devoid of emotion. "If anyone is watching this, it means I made a mistake, that I got caught. But I want you to know that I don't regret anything. I did what I had to do. I eliminated obstacles. I took what I deserved. Marcus was weak. Leah was a means to an end. Andre was a risk. The elderly were opportunities. I feel no remorse. I only did what no one else had the courage to do." The video ended. The detective turned off the screen. "With this, your case is closed. She is going to spend the rest of her life in prison." The trial began 2 months later. The courtroom was packed with journalists, onlookers, and the families of the victims Kendra had left in her wake. I was in the front row. I wanted to look her in the eye. I wanted her to know that she hadn't won, that the truth had come to light. Kendra walked in handcuffed. She wore a dark gray suit, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked different, smaller, more real. She was no longer the perfect woman everyone knew. She was just a criminal facing the consequences of her actions. Our eyes met. For a second I saw something in her eyes. It wasn't remorse. It was rage. Rage because she had been caught. Because her perfect plan had collapsed. She looked away and sat down next to her lawyer and the trial began. The prosecutor, a sharp, direct woman in her 40s, presented the case with precision. She showed the photos, the messages from the phone, the videos from the safe, and the forensic testimonies. Every piece of evidence was like a nail in Kendra's coffin. Julian testified. He entered the courtroom in shackles, looking worn out and haggard. He began to speak in a trembling voice. He recounted how Kendra had seduced him, how she had proposed the plan, and how the two of them had waited until Marcus was alone. I held his arms, Julian confessed. Kendra pushed him. I saw him fall down the stairs. I heard the thud of his head against the floor, and I didn't do anything. I just stood there while she called emergency services, faking panic. Tears streamed down my face. Hearing the details of my son's death was heartbreaking, but I needed to hear it. I needed to know exactly what they had done to him. Julian continued talking. He spoke about Leah, how Kendra had asked for his help to get rid of her. Kendra gave her something, a drug. Leah passed out. I drove her to the lot. Kendra hit her head with a rock. Then we buried her. It all took less than an hour. The room was completely silent. You could only hear the sound of collective breathing. People were horrified. Julian also spoke about Andre. Kendra followed him that night. She waited until he reached the lonely road. She rammed him with her own car, pushing him off the road. Then she reported the accident as if she had just passed by. No one suspected. Kendra's lawyer tried to discredit Julian. You are lying to reduce your sentence. You are blaming my client for everything to save yourself. But Julian didn't back down. I'm not lying. I have to live with this for the rest of my life. The least I can do is tell the truth. Then came the forensic experts. They explained the results of the autopsies, the marks on Marcus' wrists, the type of trauma Leah suffered, and the medications found in the bodies of the elderly patients from the hospital. Everything confirmed Julian's version. Then, former co-workers, surviving patients, and neighbors who had seen strange things testified. Every testimony added another layer to the story. Another proof of Kendra's evil. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Finally, the time came for closing arguments. The prosecutor stood before the jury. Kendra Hawthorne is not a person who made a mistake. She is not someone who acted on impulse. She is a predator, calculating and cold. She killed at least 6 people, maybe more. And she did it without remorse. She destroyed families, ruined lives, stole a baby from her real mother, and murdered her own husband. And all for money, for ambition, because she believed she deserved more than she had. She deserves no compassion. She deserves justice. She deserves to spend the rest of her life paying for what she did. Kendra's lawyer tried to create doubt. The evidence is circumstantial. My client is the victim of a campaign against her. Julian Hayes is the real culprit. He is using Kendra as a scapegoat. You cannot convict someone based on the words of a confessed criminal. But it didn't work. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the tension in the room was palpable. The judge asked for the verdict. The foreman stood up. In the case of the murder of Marcus Bridges, we find the defendant guilty. In the case of the murder of Leah Davis, we find the defendant guilty. In the case of the murder of Andre Walker, we find the defendant guilty. In the cases of the 3 elderly patients from the hospital, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. I looked at Kendra. Her face showed no emotion. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there as if none of this mattered to her. As if she had accepted her fate long ago. The judge spoke. Kendra Hawthorne has been found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. I sentence you to 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The room erupted in murmurs. I could only close my eyes. It was the end. Kendra would never leave prison. She would never harm anyone again. Justice had been served, but I felt only a profound emptiness because none of this would bring Marcus back. After the trial, Detective Reynolds approached me. "Justice," he said simply. I nodded. "Yes, but at what cost?" He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You saved Isabella. That's what's important. You gave her a chance at a normal life, a life without lies." He was right. Isabella was what mattered now. She was my reason for moving forward. I returned home. Geneva was waiting for me with Isabella. My granddaughter was playing with her dolls. When she saw me, she ran toward me. "Grandma, where were you?" "I had to do something important, my love. But I'm all done now. I'm here with you." I hugged her tightly. She smelled of cookies and happiness. She was everything I needed. The following days were quieter. The media circus began to fade. People found other stories to tell. I focused on Isabella, on giving her the childhood she deserved. I took her to the park. We read stories before bed. We baked cookies together. Slowly, she started calling me Mommy. First it surprised me. Then I realized it was natural. I was the only mother figure she had now. "Is it okay if I call you Mommy?" she asked me one night. She was 4 years old, lying in her bed. I was stroking her hair. "Of course, my love. You can call me whatever makes you feel comfortable." She smiled. "Mommy Grandma." I laughed. "Mommy Grandma." She nodded. "Because you're my grandma, but you're like my mommy too." My heart melted. "I like it. Mommy Grandma sounds perfect." I kissed her on the forehead. "Now sleep. Tomorrow we're going to the zoo." The months passed, turning into years. Isabella grew up. She started elementary school, made friends, and learned to read and write. She was a brilliant girl full of life. Sometimes I saw Marcus in her gestures, in her smile, and that gave me peace. Geneva remained my confidant, my support. We had dinner together every week. We talked about everything: Isabella, life, and how we had survived all that horror. "You're stronger than you thought," she would tell me. "You saved that child. You gave her a future." One day, when Isabella was 7 years old, she asked me the question I had feared. "Mommy Grandma, where is my other mom? The one who had me in her belly?" I took a deep breath. I knew this moment would come. I had prepared what to say. "Your mom was named Leah. She was a very brave woman. She loved you very much. Why isn't she here?" Isabella looked at me with those innocent eyes. "Because she had to go to heaven. But before she left, she asked me to take care of you, to give you all the love she couldn't give you." It wasn't entirely a lie. In my heart, I believed Leah would have wanted me to care for her daughter. And my daddy? Another difficult question. "Your daddy is in heaven too. His name was Marcus. He was my son, and he would have loved you with all his heart." Isabella thought for a moment. "So you're my real grandma from my daddy?" I nodded. "Yes, my love. I'm your real grandma." She smiled. "I like that, because then we're connected by the heart." I hugged her. Exactly, by the heart. I decided not to tell her about Kendra. Not yet. Maybe when she was older, when she could understand. Years later, when Isabella turned 16, I told her the whole truth. She deserved it. We cried together. She asked questions, processed the information. It was hard, but in the end, she told me something I will never forget. "Thank you for saving me, for giving me a life." "You saved me too," I replied. "You gave me a reason to keep going after losing your daddy." We embraced, and I knew we had healed together. That despite all the pain and all the darkness, we had found light. The blanket that had caused everything was still kept in my closet. I had washed it and repaired it. Sometimes I would take it out and look at it. I remembered how a small object had uncovered so many secrets, how it had been the catalyst for discovering the truth. Today, Isabella is 21 years old. She is studying medicine in college. She wants to be a pediatrician. She says she wants to help kids like her, children who have been through difficult situations and need someone who understands them. I am so proud of the woman she has become. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen Kendra throwing that blanket into the trash. If I hadn't rescued it, if I hadn't found the phone, Kendra would still be free. Maybe she would have killed more people. Isabella would be growing up under the care of a murderer. But fate had other plans. That afternoon in October 18 years ago now, something compelled me to act. Something bigger than me. Perhaps it was Marcus. Perhaps it was Leah guiding me from wherever they were, ensuring their daughter was safe. Geneva is still my best friend. She's 83 now. I'm 87. We meet every afternoon for tea. We talk about old times, about how we survived that nightmare, about how we built a new life after the horror. Do you ever think about her? Geneva asked me one afternoon. She knew who she was referring to. Kendra. Sometimes I admitted. I wonder if she ever felt anything, any remorse, any guilt. Geneva shook her head. People like her don't feel. They just calculate. They just take. She was right. Kendra never showed regret. Not even in prison. As Detective Reynolds told me years ago, she continued to insist that she hadn't done anything wrong, that she had only taken what was due to her, that the world owed her more than it had given her. Julian, on the other hand, did show remorse. He wrote letters asking for forgiveness to the victims' families and to me. I never replied. I couldn't forgive someone who had helped kill my son. But at least he had the decency to admit his guilt, to try to atone for his sins. He died in prison 5 years ago from a heart attack. He was only 53. When I heard, I felt nothing, neither relief nor sadness, just indifference. It was a closed chapter in a story I preferred to forget. Kendra is still alive, serving her 6 consecutive life sentences in a maximum security prison. Isabella once asked me if I wanted to visit her, to see the woman who had killed her father, who had stolen her childhood. I refused absolutely. I don't need to see her. I don't need her explanation. All I need is to know that she is where she belongs, paying for what she did. Isabella respected my decision. She also had no interest in meeting Kendra. For her, that woman was a ghost from the past, someone who existed only in stories, in warnings about what human evil is capable of. Her real family was me. It was Geneva. It was the friends she had made, the people who truly loved her. A few months ago, Isabella brought me something. A gift wrapped in lavender. I won't let anyone harm you ever again, I vowed. Your daddy would have wanted you to be safe above all else, and I'm going to dedicate myself to making sure that happens. Geneva entered the room and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You did it, Olivia, she said, her voice filled with admiration. You saved that child. I shook my head, still grappling with the enormity of it all. No, I just did what any grandmother would do, what I should have been doing from the very beginning. Geneva settled down beside me on the sofa. Don't beat yourself up about it, she urged. You couldn't have possibly known what Kendra was capable of. No one could have. Maybe she was right, but the guilt was still there. A persistent ache in my heart. If I had been more observant, if I had asked more questions and trusted less, maybe Marcus would still be alive. Maybe Leah too. What happens now? Geneva asked, breaking the silence. Detective Reynolds is going to keep working on building the case against them. I explained. There will be trials and a lot of testimonies. It's going to be a long and grueling process, but Kendra is going to pay for everything she's done, and Julian will too. Geneva nodded slowly. Good, she said firmly. They both deserve it. The following months were a complete blur. Kendra and Julian's case became a full-blown media circus. Newspapers were filled with stories about the killer nurse, the woman who had allegedly murdered her husband and her daughter's biological mother, all for the sake of money. Cameras were constantly camped outside the police precinct every time there was a hearing or any kind of development in the case. I did my best to shield Isabella from all the negativity and attention. I enrolled her in a local preschool, bought her some new clothes and toys, and started fixing up a room in my house just for her. I painted the walls a soft, cheerful yellow, and filled the space with stuffed animals and books, hoping to create a cozy and comforting environment. I wanted her to feel completely at home, to forget all the horror she had lived through in her short life. But the nights were the hardest. Isabella often had nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, crying out for her mommy. And I never knew what to say to her. I couldn't tell her the truth. That her mommy was in jail, that her mommy had killed her daddy, and that her mommy wasn't even her real mommy to begin with. All I could do was hold her close, sing her gentle lullabies, and reassure her that she was safe and that I would always take care of her. Slowly but surely, the nightmares started to become less frequent. Isabella began to smile more often, to play and laugh, and to just be a normal happy child. That gave me a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could get through this. Detective Reynolds kept me informed about the progress of the case. Julian had decided to accept a plea deal offered by the district attorney's office. In exchange for his testimony against Kendra, he would receive a reduced sentence, 25 years instead of life in prison. It infuriated me that he was getting any kind of leniency at all, but I understood that his testimony was absolutely crucial to securing a conviction against Kendra. Kendra, on the other hand, refused to plead guilty to anything. Her lawyer argued that all the evidence against her was purely circumstantial, that there was no concrete proof that she had actually committed the murders, and that Julian was simply lying to save his own skin. But the prosecution had built a pretty solid case. The burner phone with all the incriminating messages, the photos and videos found in the safe, the bank transfers, and the forensic evidence from Marcus' second autopsy. Everything pointed directly at Kendra. The trial was officially scheduled to begin in about 3 months. One afternoon, while Isabella was napping, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Detective Reynolds. "Mrs. Bridges, I need you to come down to the precinct. There's something you need to see." His voice sounded unusually serious, even more so than usual. "What happened?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'd really prefer to explain it to you in person. Can you come this afternoon?" Quickly agreed. I asked Geneva to watch Isabella for me, and then I drove straight to the police precinct. The detective was waiting for me in his office. He had a thick folder sitting on his desk. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing toward a chair. I sat down, my nerves on edge. He opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. They were images from various crime scenes. One was of the vacant lot where Leah's body had been discovered. Another was of the staircase where Marcus had died. "Remember I told you that we were still investigating Isabella's biological father?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes. You said there was no official record of him." The detective nodded in agreement. "That's correct. Leah never put the father's name on Isabella's birth certificate, but we kept digging. We spoke with Leah's former coworkers, friends, and neighbors, and we uncovered something quite interesting. Several witnesses mentioned that Leah had been seeing someone, a man who worked at the same hospital as her, the same hospital where Marcus and Kendra also worked." My stomach clenched into a tight knot. "Who was it?" I asked, dreading the answer. The detective reached for another photo. It was an image from a hospital ID badge. A man who looked to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and light-colored eyes. And then it hit me. The resemblance to Isabella was unmistakable. This man, the detective said, was named Andre Walker. He worked as a lab technician, and according to several testimonies, he and Leah were romantically involved. "Where is he now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The detective lowered his gaze, a somber expression on his face. "He died about 3.5 years ago, approximately 6 months after Leah's disappearance." A chill ran down my spine. "How did he die?" The detective looked directly at me. His eyes filled with a mixture of pity and grim determination. "Car accident. He lost control of his car on a remote road, and it went down into a ravine. He died instantly." "Another accident," I murmured, the word catching in my throat. The detective nodded. "Exactly. And guess who reported the accident? Who was the first person to arrive at the scene?" I didn't need him to tell me the answer. I already knew. "Kendra," I said, my voice flat. The detective placed another photo on the table. It showed Kendra on duty at the hospital on the night of Andre's death. Kendra claimed that she was driving home from her shift when she saw Andre's car veer off the road, he explained. She called emergency services, but by the time they arrived, Andre was already dead. "Do you think she killed him too?" I asked, the thought almost too horrifying to contemplate. The detective took a deep breath before answering. We don't have any concrete proof, not yet anyway. The case was closed as an accident at the time, but now with everything else we've uncovered, we're reopening the investigation. There are simply too many coincidences. First Leah disappears, then Andre dies, and then Marcus. It's all connected somehow, and all of them died in circumstances that Kendra could have easily manipulated. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. How many people did she kill? How many lives did she destroy? The detective closed the folder, his expression grim. I don't know the answer to that yet, but we're going to find out. I'm going to personally review every single case, every suspicious death that has any connection to Kendra in the past 5 years. If there are more victims out there, we'll find them, I promise you. I left the police precinct in a complete daze, reeling from the information I had just received. Kendra wasn't just a murderer. She was a full-blown serial killer. Meticulous, calculating, and completely devoid of any remorse. She had systematically eliminated anyone who stood in her way, like pieces on a chessboard. Leah, because she had given birth to the baby Kendra so desperately wanted. Andre, because he was the baby's biological father, and could potentially try to claim her. And Marcus, because he had the money she craved. I went straight back home. Geneva was waiting for me in the living room, her face etched with worry. What happened? You look as white as a ghost. I told her everything about Andre, about the possibility of even more victims, about the sheer scale of Kendra's depravity. Geneva covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. My God, she whispered. It's even worse than we thought. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, tossing and turning, consumed by thoughts of Kendra's victims. Leah, Andre, Marcus, and all the other people who might have fallen prey to her evil schemes. I thought about the immense pain she had inflicted, and how I had been so blind, so close to her for so many years, without ever truly seeing who she really was. The next morning, Detective Reynolds showed up at my house without any warning. He had even more bad news to share. We found something else, he said, his voice grim. We checked the medical records at the hospital where Kendra worked, and we discovered 3 suspicious deaths of patients under her care in the last 4 years. All of them were elderly, he continued. All of them died of cardiac arrest. At the time, no one suspected anything. The deaths were simply attributed to complications related to old age. But now we're exhuming the bodies and looking for traces of any medication that could have induced the heart attacks. I felt faint, struggling to process what he was saying. Are you telling me that Kendra killed her own patients? I asked, my voice trembling. The detective nodded slowly. It's a definite possibility. If the analyses confirm that they were poisoned, then we're potentially talking about at least 6 victims, and possibly even more. But why would she do it? I asked, my mind racing. What did she gain by killing those elderly people? The detective pulled out another folder. Money, he said flatly. It was always about the money. 2 of those patients had recently modified their wills shortly before they died, he explained. They left significant donations to the hospital. Kendra had been particularly kind and attentive to them, earning their trust. And then, mysteriously, the money from those donations disappeared. It never actually reached the hospital. Instead, it was diverted to a series of phantom bank accounts. We're currently tracing those accounts, and so far, every single one of them has some kind of connection to Kendra or Julian. I simply couldn't believe what I was hearing. Kendra had built a vast criminal empire, killing, robbing, and lying her way to the top, all while maintaining a perfect smile and wearing elegant dresses, so no one would ever suspect a thing. No one had ever suspected a thing until I found that phone. Is there anything else? I asked, bracing myself for more bad news. The detective nodded. Julian is cooperating with us more than we expected. He says that Kendra kept some hidden documents, almost like an insurance policy, just in case Julian ever betrayed her. She wanted to have something to threaten him with. What kind of documents? I asked, intrigued. The detective leaned forward, lowering his voice. Bank records, contracts, even videos. Julian claims that Kendra secretly recorded him helping her with Marcus's murder, and that she has those recordings hidden somewhere. Where? I pressed. The detective shook his head. Julian says he doesn't know exactly where. Kendra never told him the specific location, but he thinks they might be hidden somewhere in her house, in some secret spot that only she knows about. My mind was spinning trying to figure out the implications of this new information. We need to find those documents, I said urgently. If they actually exist, they could be the final piece of evidence we need to seal the case against her. The detective nodded in agreement. We already have a search warrant. We're going to search that house from top to bottom, every nook and cranny, every wall, until we find exactly what we're looking for. That afternoon, a team of police officers arrived at Kendra's house to execute the search warrant. I insisted on going with them. I needed to be there. I needed to see her perfect life come crashing down around her piece by piece. The officers methodically searched every inch of the house. They emptied drawers, rummaged through closets, lifted rugs, and knocked on walls, searching for hidden compartments or anything out of the ordinary. After nearly 4 hours of fruitless searching, one of the officers suddenly yelled from the basement, "I found something." We all raced downstairs, our hearts pounding with anticipation. The officer had managed to move an old bookshelf, revealing a small discreet safe built into the wall. "We need to get this open," the detective said, his voice tight with excitement. They called in a safe-cracking specialist, who arrived within 20 minutes. After a bit of tinkering, he managed to crack the safe open. Inside, we discovered a veritable treasure trove of evidence. External hard drives, USB drives, folders filled with documents, and stacks of printed photographs. Everything was meticulously organized and labeled, with every file and document carefully placed in its proper spot. It was Kendra's personal archive, her own twisted crime log. "It's almost as if she wanted to remember everything," the detective remarked as he began to review the documents, "as if she was actually proud of what she had done." Among the files were several videos, including recordings of Kendra and Julian plotting Marcus's murder. There were also videos of Kendra confessing everything to the camera, as if she were documenting her crimes for posterity. In one of the videos, Kendra spoke directly to the camera, her voice chillingly cold and devoid of any emotion. "If anyone is watching this, it means I made a mistake, that I got caught," she said, her eyes glinting with a strange kind of pride. "But I want you to know that I don't regret a single thing. I did what I had to do. I eliminated obstacles. I took what I deserved. Marcus was weak. Leah was simply a means to an end. Andre was a risk that needed to be dealt with. The elderly were opportunities that presented themselves. I feel absolutely no remorse. I simply did what." She handed me a package wrapped in colored paper. "Open it," she said, smiling warmly. I carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside I found a brand new hand-knitted blanket, a perfect mint green, exactly like the one I had made so many years ago. "I made it myself," Isabella announced proudly. "I learned to knit. I wanted to recreate the blanket that brought us together, the one that saved my life." Tears started streaming down my cheeks. I hugged her as tightly as I could. "It's perfect," I choked out. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever been given." That night, I carefully spread the new blanket over my bed. Next to it, I placed the old blanket, the one I had kept tucked away in the closet all these years. I took a moment to compare them. They were nearly identical in appearance. However, this new one held no hidden secrets within its fibers. It hadn't absorbed any pain. Instead, it was woven purely with love. Pure, unadulterated love from a granddaughter to her grandmother. "You know," Isabella said to me during dinner, "I've been thinking a lot about Leah, my biological mom. I really wish I could have gotten to know her." I reached across the table and took her hand in mine. "Me too," I said softly. "From what I understand, she was a truly good person, incredibly brave and strong. She was all alone and terrified, but she loved her baby so much." "She loved you. Do you think she would be proud of me?" Isabella asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm absolutely sure of it," I replied without a moment's hesitation. She would be so incredibly proud of the amazing woman you've become, of all your achievements, of your kind and generous heart. I truly believe that wherever she is, she's watching over you, protecting you, just like your daddy Marcus does." Isabella managed to smile through her tears. "And you, Mommy Grandma, are you proud of me?" she asked, searching my face. I looked deeply into her eyes, those eyes that reminded me so powerfully of my son. "More than proud," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You are the reason I'm still here. The reason every single day is worthwhile. You saved me just as much as I saved you." That night, before I went to sleep, I held both blankets close to me, the old one and the new one. I thought about the entirety of our journey, the pain, the losses, the secrets I had uncovered, the justice I had fought so hard to achieve, and the incredible love I had found even in the midst of such profound darkness. The old blanket had been my guide, my map leading me to the truth. It had held the key to unlocking a secret that unmasked a monster, saved an innocent child, and ultimately brought justice for the dead. It was so much more than just a simple blanket. It was a powerful symbol of truth, of resilience, and of enduring maternal love. And now the new blanket represented the future. A future free from lies, free from pain, free from dark and dangerous secrets. It was the promise that Isabella would finally have the life she deserved. A life filled with love, endless opportunities, and unwavering hope. 2 blankets, 2 distinct stories, 1 family. I got out of bed and quietly went to Isabella's room. She was fast asleep, her breathing soft and even. I approached her bedside, gently smoothed her hair away from her face, and placed a soft kiss on her forehead. "I love you, my girl," I whispered. "You're my reason for living." She murmured something in her sleep. I couldn't quite make out what she said, but she was smiling, and that was enough for me. I returned to my own room, lay back down in bed, and closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't have any nightmares. I didn't dream of Kendra or of Marcus falling down the stairs, or of Leah's terrified screams. I dreamed of peace, of a beautiful garden overflowing with flowers, of Isabella's joyous laughter, of a bright and hopeful future. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming brightly through my window. Isabella was already up and moving around in the kitchen, making breakfast. I could smell the comforting aroma of coffee and toast. "Good morning, Mommy Grandma," she greeted me cheerfully. "Good morning, my love," I replied. I sat down at the table and watched her as she moved effortlessly around the kitchen, so full of life and energy, so strong and confident, such a far cry from the scared little girl I had rescued all those years ago. She had grown up so much. She had blossomed into someone truly incredible, and I had the distinct privilege of witnessing it all, of being an important part of her story, of helping her to write a completely different ending than the one Kendra had so cruelly planned for her. "What are you thinking about?" Isabella asked me, breaking my reverie as she poured my coffee. I smiled, thinking about how incredibly lucky I was to have found that blanket on that fateful day. Isabella sat down across from me. "I think about that too," she said. "How such a simple object could have changed everything so profoundly. It saved my life, you know." "It wasn't the blanket," I told her gently. "It was you. Your very existence. The immense love your daddy felt for you. That's what gave me the strength to seek out the truth, to never give up, no matter how difficult it became." We ate breakfast together, talking about her plans for the future, her college aspirations, her dreams, and I could almost feel Marcus there with us, beaming with pride and happiness. That afternoon, I decided to finally do something I had been putting off for far too many years. I went to the cemetery to visit the graves of Marcus and Leah. They were in different sections of the cemetery, but I made sure to visit both. I brought flowers with me, lilies for Marcus and delicate white roses for Leah. I knelt down in front of my son's grave. "Hello, my love," I whispered. "Isabella is doing so well. She's growing up to be beautiful, strong, and incredibly smart. I know you would be so proud of her. I'm doing my very best, trying to be for her what you would have been. I miss you every single day, but I keep going for her, for you." Then I walked over to Leah's grave. It was much simpler, with fewer flowers and fewer visitors. Hello, Leah, I said softly. We never met, but I'm taking care of your daughter. I love her as if she were my own. She is truly wonderful. She inherited your strength and your courage. I want you to know that she is safe, that she is happy, that she will never lack for love. The wind picked up gently, rustling the leaves on the nearby trees. I felt an unusual sense of peace wash over me, as if both of them were thanking me, as if they somehow knew that I had kept my promise, that I had protected Isabella, that I had given her the life she so rightfully deserved. I returned home just as the sun began to set. Isabella was waiting for me, having already prepared dinner. We ate together, sharing laughter and telling stories. When it was finally time for bed, I went to my room. I picked up the new blanket, the one Isabella had given me with so much love. I wrapped myself in it, and as I closed my eyes, I thought deeply about everything that simple blanket represented. The old blanket had guarded secrets, exposed lies, and ultimately brought justice to light. The new blanket guarded promises, hopes for the future, and unconditional love. Both were integral parts of our shared story, of our long and arduous journey. And as I gazed up at the stars through my window, I understood something profound. That the water never truly forgets. That secrets, no matter how deeply buried, always find a way to surface. That the truth, however painful it may be, is always, without exception, better than a lie. And that love, true and unwavering love, can survive even the darkest of times. The blanket had been the beginning, but Isabella was the culmination. The happy ending that none of us had ever expected. The miracle born out of tragedy. And as I drifted off to sleep, I whispered one last prayer for Marcus, for Leah, for Andre, and for all of Kendra's victims. Rest in peace, I thought. Your sacrifice was not in vain. Isabella lives. Isabella thrives. And that is truly all that matters. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.